Chapter 1. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Changing the narrative. Translator. Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios Talent. Ordinary. Enlightenment. Ordinary. Temperament. Ordinary. Life history. Ordinary. Innate ability. Ordinary. Overall evaluation. Ordinary. Looking at his evaluation form in the sect, Shenran could not help but shake his head helplessly. Ordinary, everything was ordinary. It was no wonder that the sect wanted to send him to the servant quarters to become a servant disciple. Sigh, in my previous life, I was just mediocre, accomplishing nothing. I didn't expect to have transmigrated. Everyone else is just showing off their ambitions and skills, but when it comes to me, I'm just an ordinary person, like one of the masses. Shenran put down the form in his hand and sighed softly. There was nothing bad about being an ordinary person. But since he had transmigrated, shouldn't he dream of achieving great things and becoming a powerhouse who could move mountains and fill the seas, seize the moon, and pluck the stars? With a breath of vital energy, he felt like the rapid wind that could travel 1,000 miles. It was the dream of many. Half a month ago, Shenran transmigrated to this fantasy world and became a disciple of the 9th Hall of the Empyrean Sword Sect. Before he could rejoice, he received the results of the triennial sect assessment. In this assessment report, it clearly showed that he was only an extremely ordinary person who had barely passed the assessment. There were many disciples of this level in the Empyrean Sword Sect, and he was definitely not within their consideration for development. Therefore, he was naturally eliminated by the Empyrean Sword Sect. He would be sent to the servant quarters and become a servant disciple. In this cruel world where talent determined how far one could go, this also meant that Shenran's future could be seen at a glance. Tomorrow would be a repeat of today, and it would go on until 100 years later when he died of old age in the servant quarters. Then, like many senior servants, he would be casually thrown away and buried in a mountain outside the Empyrean Sword Sect. From then on, he would be accompanied by insects and mudstones, and Shenran would no longer be in this world. Earth to earth, dust to dust. Forget it. If it is predestined that you have it in your life, you will have it, but if it isn't predestined, do not push it. After sighing and comforting himself, Shenran started to pack his luggage and planned to report to the servant quarters. Ding! Narrative Modification System loading. Narrative Modification System loading successful. Note 1. The host will see the narratives of everything in the world and have the opportunity to modify them. The narrative modified by the host will be mapped into reality. Note 2. The first time you install this system, you will be given 3 chances to modify the narrative. The modification of the narrative cannot be used to directly modify cultivation. Note 3. The narrative after the modification is logical and reasonable. Suddenly, a cold notification sounded in his mind. Yes. Suddenly. Shenran suddenly raised his head, his eyes shining brightly. Narrative Modification System. The opportunity to cheat is here. Shenran, who was familiar with online literature in his previous life, knew that his opportunity to cheat had come. He just didn't know. What the hell is this narrative modification system? As he hesitated, he looked at the sword he had placed on the table. Immediately, a narrative that only he could see appeared in front of him. This is an extremely ordinary iron sword. There's nothing eye-catching about it. It's ordinary. Do you want to modify the narrative? Note. Currently, the host can modify the narrative 3x. Looking at the narrative, Shenran only thought for a moment and understood. In other words, can I edit and modify the narrative of this iron sword? For example, if I change the narrative of this iron sword to the number 1 divine sword in the world, would this ordinary iron sword become the number 1 divine sword in the world? In an instant. Shenran smiled broadly. Good God! If my imagination is big enough, wouldn't I be invincible? This is purely a test of imagination. In this world, the most important thing in cultivation is talent. A day of cultivation for a talented expert is equivalent to 100 days for ordinary people. Then, a smile appeared on Shenran's face as he slowly turned to look at himself in the mirror. Immediately, a line of narrative appeared. This is an ordinary young man who was born ordinary. If nothing unexpected happens, he will live an ordinary life. Looking at the word, ordinary, in the introduction, Shenran did not look disappointed at all. Instead, he looked as if he had expected it indeed. If nothing unexpected happened, he would live a mediocre life like countless seniors who had been sent to the servant quarters. Then he would die and wither, turning into dust. Phew! Shenran took a deep breath, and the divine light in his eyes began to flicker violently. System, modify the narrative. Instantly, all the narratives about him were cleared and displayed as pending input. Without any hesitation, Shenran began to type the narrative. This is a young man born with the bones of a supreme being. He possesses the Panga's sacred body. Panga means creator of the universe in Chinese mythology, that is immune to the corrosion of curses, and ancient immortal eyes that can see through the supreme techniques of the world. His talent is 1 in a million, and it is world-shaking. He is born to cultivate the Tao and handle calamities. He is destined to rule the ages alone. He will wipe out all his enemies in the future, until no one in the world dares to call himself supreme. With a crackling sound, Shenran copied the narratives of male protagonists in light novels from his previous life and wrote his own narrative. He only stopped after writing for half an hour. He rubbed his chin and nodded in satisfaction at the narrative, which was like an essay. Is that reasonable? Yes, it is. Shenran smiled silently, then collected his thoughts. System, generate a new narrative. Ding. Narrative in progress, ding. Narrative completed. In an instant, Shenran's entire body and soul began to tremble. His entire body began to change shockingly. Every bone in his body emitted a dazzling golden light. Mysterious patterns appeared on every one of his bones, like runes written by the heavens. A transformation. All the bones in his body were transforming into supreme bones. The supreme bones contained endless potential. As long as a person had supreme bones, it meant that his leveling speed was 100 times faster than others. And on the way to leveling up, there were no limits. There was once a human emperor who became one of the 10 strongest experts in the world in just 300 years because he had supreme bones in his body. With supreme bones, he had the foundation to become a supreme being. It could be said that he was destined to be a supreme being. At this moment, the 300 bones in Shenran's body were all transforming into supreme bones. How scary was that? This meant that as long as he did not die early, he would definitely become the supreme ruler of heaven and earth in less than 50 years, looking down upon the sun, the moon, and the stars. It was known that the 10 strongest cultivators of the human race had cultivated for at least 300 years before they obtained top-notch strength. From this moment on, Shenran would no longer be an ordinary person who achieved nothing for the rest of his life. Boom! 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 In the next moment, the blood in his entire body suddenly boiled, like a surging river wave colliding with a reef, emitting a muffled bang. Immediately after, strands of scarlet hair with impurities grew out of his pores before falling off. His blood turned from red to hot gold. This was the awakening of the Panga's sacred body. There were 3,000 holy bodies in the human race. And the Panga's sacred body was number 1. It was also known as the strongest human constitution. As long as you had the Panga's sacred body, it meant that your physical body was incomparably powerful and invincible among your peers. After mastering it, one could achieve a unique and unrivaled strongest physical body. With just his physical strength, he was invincible in the world. In the history of mankind before that, only 2 people had awakened the Panga's sacred body. And when they were alive, both of them were the strongest cultivators in the world at that time. Unmatched. At this moment, the Panga's sacred body, which had only appeared twice in the tens of thousands of years of human history, had awakened in Shenran's body. Rumble. A blood chi furnace suddenly appeared in Shenran's body. The monstrous blood chi formed a pillar that passed through his body and soared into the sky like a beacon. The Panga's sacred body was awakening. Behind him, 6 great phenomena appeared, reflecting the 9th heaven and wheel of reincarnation. The great immortal descending on the 9th heaven. The green lotus sprouting from the sea of bitterness. The yin-yang life and death diagram. Brilliant stars shining on a sunny day. These phenomena would only appear in the world when someone with infinite potential was born. At the end of these 6 phenomena, he would evolve into the 6 paths of reincarnation fist that could dominate the world and crush the ancient era. And this was far from over. Chapter 2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Innate Immortal Eyes. Supreme Bones. Translator. Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios, Rumble. The phenomena of the Supreme Bones and the Panga's sacred body continued to unfold on Shenran's body, while the other changes did not stop and continued to be born. Shenran's clear eyes became like mirrors, slowly breaking apart. Rip. Flirtatious double pupils appeared in his eyes. Innate Immortal Eyes. Dichoria. This was the manifestation of the ancient legend. If having innate supreme bones made one a supreme being, then having innate immortal eyes made one a saint. In terms of talent and potential, they were definitely not inferior to the supreme bones. The innate immortal eyes not only had the power to see through all illusions and supreme techniques in the world, but it also had an extremely terrifying killing eye technique that could destroy the world. It could be said that with this pair of innate double-dot pupil eyes, no one would be able to hide from Shenran's eyes in the future. All obscure and profound techniques would no longer be secrets in Shenran's eyes. To Shenran, a flawless attack method would seem full of flaws. In an instant, the double pupils in Shenran's eyes reflected each other, like 2 abysmal demon wells. At a glance, it was intoxicating. Ancient immortal eyes, done. At this moment, there was also a tremendous change in Shenran's body. In the divine sea in his dantian, a dazzling tree root slowly broke out of the ground. That was, a heavenly spirit root. Shenran could no longer remember that the male protagonist in the novel which he had read in his previous life had this heavenly spirit root. He only remembered that the cultivation of the heavenly spirit root was extremely terrifying. Every day of breathing was equivalent to an ordinary person's 100 days. Those with the heavenly spirit root could cultivate at a rapid pace, surpassing past and present records. Born to break all legendary records. So he added the heavenly spirit root to his narrative. Phew, suddenly, Shenran's dantian seemed to have turned into a vortex eye. The spiritual energy that was extremely difficult to absorb had become violently excited. The next moment, there was no need for him to guide it at all. A huge amount of spiritual energy surged towards him from all directions and poured into his body. If a peerless mighty figure could see what was happening at this moment, they would be shocked. At this moment, Shenran was like a vortex eye, a black hole that devoured everything in the universe, crazily swallowing all the dense spiritual energy into his body. Muscle cleansing. A transformation. As if reborn. At this moment, all the narratives that Shenran had modified became real in his body. Innate supreme bones, Panga's sacred body, ancient immortal eyes, heavenly spirit root, maximum level sword skill. Any one of these settings could create an immortal legend or a primordial epic. At this moment, all these settings were placed on Shenran alone. Strange phenomena appeared, and the world changed color. Half an hour later, calm was restored, and the room became clear and bright. Closing his eyes tightly, Shenran's eyelids began to twitch. Immediately, His eyelids were twitching faster and faster. Finally. Bong! Shenran opened his eyes, and a resplendent divine light shot out from them. At this moment, Shenran's black hair was as black as ink and scattered behind him like a waterfall. His hair was sparkling and emitted a faint immortal glow. His entire flesh and skin were as fragile as a newborn's. His immortal bones were covered in a thin layer of light. In his eyes, 2 circles of black demonic pupils reflected each other. They were like the incomparably deep ocean, but also like an abysmal demonic well. One could not see through them at a glance or guess what this person was thinking, but could tell that they were extremely deep. At this moment, there was no change in Shenran's facial features. But compared to before, they exuded a different aura. He had a noble aura now, as well as a cold and dignified air that made him seem aloof. At a glance, one would feel ashamed of one's inferiority and keep a distance from him. Pack up and go to the servant quarters. Shenran took a deep breath, stood up, and quickly packed his luggage. He put on black cloth boots and a green shirt and walked down the mountain to the servant quarters. The moment he pushed open the door and walked out of the room, his aura returned to its previous state, and the double pupils in his eyes merged into one. At a glance, he didn't seem to have changed much from before. Only by looking closely would one sense that he was extraordinary. Meanwhile, in the highest and deepest part of the first summit of the Empyrean Sword Sect, even the sect master of the entire Empyrean Sword Sect could not easily set foot on the first summit. An old man with grey hair and an ancient aura was sitting cross-legged on a praying mat. His face was covered in age spots, and he was like a clay statue. He had an extremely rotten and ancient aura of death. Under his praying mat, there was a yin-yang fish diagram that was quietly spinning. The next moment. Boom! The old man in the Taoist robe suddenly opened his eyes. An extremely sharp divine light flashed across his turbid eyes. He stood up slowly, his eyes narrowing. As he got up, the spinning yin-yang diagram automatically stopped. A natural mutation. Muttering to himself, he stepped down and walked out of the room. Standing at the top of the mountain, he looked down. His gaze pierced through the 9 layers of clouds into the room where the ordinary disciples lived at the foot of the mountain. He thought. That aura just now. It shouldn't be fake. Our Empyrean Sword Sect has been around for 300 years. Could it be that another prodigy has finally appeared? The old man's eyes flickered. He wanted to investigate, but after some thought, he chuckled to himself. Forget it. If there's really a chance, he'll stand in front of me one day. With interference, I'm still at a disadvantage. He waved his hand, and an invisible sword chi immediately hung down, hiding his aura. Chapter 3 You are listening at novelfull.audio. To the Servant Quarters Translator. Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios Meanwhile. 9th Summit, Empyrean Sword Sect. Mother. Are we really going to watch Ran be sent to the servant quarters? A beautiful girl with lanky legs and wearing green clothes shouted indignantly. Ching, I said that you should call me Peak Master or Teacher in the sect. You're always calling me Mother. If the other disciples in the sect hear you, what will they think? The person who replied was a graceful and beautiful woman in her 30s. This beautiful woman's eyebrows were 70.8% similar to the young girl's, but she was mature, and her figure was plump and curvaceous. Not only did she not look old at all, but she also looked more charming than the girl. She was like a ripe peach, but she was also like a cold and unattainable beauty. One couldn't help but be mesmerized. Who in the sect doesn't know that you're my mother? The young girl, Wan Qingqing, muttered softly. Seeing her mother looking at her, she couldn't help but say seriously, Mother, little Rant's aptitude is indeed average and can't be considered outstanding. But no matter what, his results in this assessment are above the passing mark. He shouldn't be sent to the servant quarters. Those who go to the servant quarters would be wasted for most of their lifetime. If little Ran stays in the servant quarters, he'd be wasted for most of his lifetime. Wan Xiling sighed and said, Ching, I know this better than you do. Although Ran is mediocre in talent, he has a pure heart, a good character, and is honest and steady. He was indeed not on the list this time. However, he offended Wang Qingxian a few days ago. As one of the 3 great Dao seeds today, Wang Qingxuan's talent is extraordinary. The day before yesterday, he had even broken through to the illumination realm. He was reputed to be a rare cultivation genius in the Empyrean Sword sect for 50 years and a powerful candidate for the future Empyrean Dao child position. Now, his reputation can be said to be like the sun in the sky. Even mother can't underestimate him when I see him. Even if Wang Qingxian doesn't deliberately target little Ran, those who want to curry favor with him will naturally help him. At this point, Wan Xiling gently pinched the space between her eyebrows. As one of the major sects in the world, although the Empyrean Sword sect was in decline, it still had thousands of disciples from the 9 peaks. Shen Ran was just the most ordinary one among the thousands of disciples. If he offended the Dao seed, Wang Qingxian, it would be a piece of cake for his subordinates to assign Shen Ran to the servant quarters. Wang Qingxian. Wan Qingqing frowned slightly. Wang Qingxian was indeed talented. He was only 20 years old, but he had already reached the illumination realm. The path of cultivation could be roughly divided into Qi refinement, divine C, illumination, marquis, king, and true emperor. Most of the ordinary disciples of the Empyrean Sword sect were still in the Qi refinement realm. For example, Shen Ran was at the 6th level of Qi refinement, and his cultivation level was considered average among the disciples of the Empyrean Sword sect. As for a genius disciple like Wan Qingqing, she had just stepped into the divine C realm. As for Wang Qingxian, he was only 20 years old, but he had already stepped into the illumination realm. Such talent was second to none in the entire cultivation world. Mother, from what I know, Wang Qingxian isn't a petty person. He won't lower himself to target junior brother Shen Ran, right? Wan Qingqing asked curiously. It was not that she thought highly of Wang Qingxian or deliberately belittled Shen Ran. However, Wang Qingxian and Shen Ran were indeed like the true dragon in the sky and the crawling ant on the ground. They were on completely different levels. That was being brutally frank. She did not think Wang Qingxian would lower his status to suppress such an ordinary disciple of the sect. Didn't I say that there's no need for Wang Qingxian to do such a thing? The people below will naturally understand and do it. Wan Xiling shook her head and continued. Alright, let's stop talking about this for the time being. Since little Ran is mother's disciple, mother will naturally think of a way to get Shen Ran out of the servant quarters in a few days. Mother, Wan Qingqing opened her mouth. Seeing Wan Xiling's determined expression, she knew that her mother had made up her mind. She could only stomp her feet and leave angrily. She understood that her mother did not want to offend Wang Qingxian for the sake of an ordinary disciple like Shen Ran. This silly child's temperament is exactly the same as when I was young. Wan Xiling looked at Wan Qingqing's angry expression and couldn't help but laugh and shake her head. This girl is still young. She doesn't see things clearly. Meanwhile, at the foot of the Empyrean Sword sect, a small yellow door. Behind the door was a simple brick house that stretched as far as the eye could see. This was the servant quarters. The simple brick house was where the servant disciples lived. Speaking of which, there were thousands of disciples in the Empyrean Sword sect, but almost half of them were servant disciples. There were so many disciples, peak masters, and elders in the mountain who needed someone to serve them. They had to tend to the medicinal herb garden, beasts, and poultry, fetch water, and cook. All of this fell on the servant disciples. Therefore, the number of servant disciples accumulated over the years had already reached a rather large number. Your elder son who's in charge of the servant quarters, right? I'm a disciple from the 9th summit. May I know where I should report to? Shenran carried his bag and stood at the small yellow door. From the 9th summit. I'll take a look. Room 24 in the 36th row of the East District. You can go there. The old man spoke lazily without looking up. Thanks a lot. Shenran nodded and walked towards the location this elder son had mentioned. Little fellow, don't be anxious. Remember to go to the laundry area to change into the uniform and token of a servant disciple after you leave your luggage. You can't wear the clothes you're wearing anymore. As the old man spoke, he looked up at Shenran. He happened to see Shenran's side profile. This little guy looks outstanding. He doesn't seem ordinary. The old man's eyebrows rose, then he shook his head. Such a person has probably offended some big shot in the sect. The weather is so cold. Let's go back to sleep. Yawning, the old man couldn't be bothered and went back to sleep. As a person whose talent had long been severed, he was able to serve as an elder in the servant quarters and govern thousands of servant disciples because he did not ask too many questions. No matter why this person came to the servant quarters, all he could do was to shut up. Chapter 4. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Breakthrough. Translator. Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios. Shenran followed the house numbers. He went all the way to room 24. In contrast to the dense immortal aura and spiritual cranes circling the 9th summit, this place was filled with birds and flowers. The servant quarters stank of sweat, feet, feces, and urine. There was also noise and laughter. This made Shenran frown slightly, feeling a little unaccustomed. This place did not look like a cultivation place at all. It was more like a noisy market square in the mortal world. Knock knock knock. Shenran knocked on the wooden door of the room. Seeing that there was no response, he pushed open the door and walked in. The room was not big, only about 30 square meters. It only contained 2 beds, some wooden cabinets, wooden tables, and other conventional items. A sallow, thin-haired, slightly wretched-looking old man in tattered black clothes was sitting cross-legged on the bed. When the wretched old man heard the sound, he opened his eyes and opened his mouth, revealing a mouthful of yellow teeth. He looked at Shenran. There was surprise in his beady eyes. A disciple from the mountains. Shenran also looked at the old man with big yellow teeth and raised his eyebrows. There's such an old servant disciple. As soon as he finished speaking, the old man with big yellow teeth immediately jumped off the bed like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. He widened his eyes and glared at Shenran. What old? I'm only 73 years old this year. I'm in my prime. Shenran was speechless. Shaking his head, Shenran didn't say anything more. He walked past him and placed the luggage on the bed. It seemed that this old man with big yellow teeth was his roommate. To him, this servant quarters was just a transition. With the narrative modification system and his talent template in which he melded the talents of the desolate Heavenly Emperor Yi, individuals with dichoria, and countless other extremely powerful geniuses, it wouldn't be long before he broke through the Qi refinement realm to the divine Sea realm. At that time, he would be able to protect himself even if he left the sect. Then he would leave this servant quarters and the Empyrean sword sect. Hey, why aren't you saying anything? Let me ask you, did you really come down from the mountain? Old Su, who had big yellow teeth, seemed to be very friendly. He quickly followed behind Shenran and pulled the corner of his sleeve curiously. Shenran paused and turned to look at the old man with big yellow teeth. He raised his eyebrows and said, "It's rare to see someone coming down from the mountain." "Not often, anyway." The old man with the big yellow teeth scratched his head. Shenran pondered for a moment and understood. The sect had an assessment every 3 years. Every time, dozens of people would be eliminated and sent to the servant quarters. Even after 10 years, there were only a few hundred people. Among these people, most of them would either leave the sect directly and return to the mortal world with their vulgar cultivation, or they would stay in the servant quarters for a period of time and leave when they could not stand it anymore. It was rare to see someone who could stay in the servant quarters forever. Compared to the thousands of people in the servant quarters, it was indeed very few. In fact, most of the servant disciples could not pass the entrance examination of the Empyrean sword sect at all. They could not even become official disciples. I'm Shenran. How should I address you, senior? Shenran smiled. What senior? Just call me Old Su. The old man with big yellow teeth grinned, revealing his big yellow teeth. Although Old Su was nothing special, he was a warm-hearted person. Along the way, Shenran completed all the necessary procedures and went to collect the uniform of the servant disciples. The hierarchy in the Empyrean sword sect was clear and strict. The servant disciples were in black robes, the ordinary disciples on the mountain were in green robes, just like what Shenran was wearing previously. The chief of the 9 peaks was dressed in white. As for the 3 Dao Seed disciples, they were similar to Wang Qingxian. There were golden clouds embroidered on the sleeves and collar of their white clothes, and the cloak on their backs was embroidered with the words Dao Seed in golden threads. He would wear the clothes according to the position he was in. He could not cross the line. When he returned to the dormitory room, the sky had already turned completely dark. Broken through. Shenran, who had just taken a breather and sat down, was surprised to find that after wandering around for an afternoon, his cultivation level had actually broken through from the 6th level of Qi refinement to the 7th level of Qi refinement. Is this the benefit of having a strong cultivation talent? Shenran laughed in his heart. He clearly didn't need to cultivate, but he was becoming stronger every second. There was no realm bottleneck. He had broken through to the 7th level of Qi refinement that had evaded him for a year without any obstruction. At this speed, I should be able to reach the 9th level of Qi refinement in 3 days. Shenran's eyes flickered slightly. Burp! Old Su burped and pulled Shenran's thoughts back. Old Su, I've really troubled you today. Shenran smiled. Of course. Old Su waved his hand with an accent from his hometown, Lingzhou. Little Shen, let me ask you. What's the scenery on the mountain like? Old Su asked, his eyes filled with anticipation. Shenran thought for a moment and replied with a smile, the scenery on the mountain is similar to the bottom. It's nothing more than standing higher and looking further away. Oh. Old Su nodded as if he understood. He had imagined experts coming and going on the mountain, but it didn't sound like that. Old Su, why are you still a servant disciple at such an old age? Shenran asked. Old Su sniffed and grinned, revealing a mouthful of big yellow teeth. What's done is done. My family died a few years ago. Shaking his head, Old Su raised his head and said, it's good that they are gone. Don't have to suffer in the human world. I'm a singleton, I'm without worries and take things easy. Stay in this servant quarters. Although it's not a good place, there's still food to eat and clothes to wear. It's better than freezing to death outside and being dragged to be chopped up and fed to the dogs. With that, Old Su stood up and stretched before walking out. Shen kid, you have fun here. I'll go out to drink and play cards. Closing the room, Old Su left. Shenran sat cross-legged on the bed alone. The candlelight flickered, illuminating his cheeks. It was quiet and peaceful. He could clearly feel himself growing stronger at a rate visible to the naked eye. If the divine sea was compared to a full bucket was a breakthrough. Then, his previous speed was like drops of water dripping into the bucket. To break through, he would have to cultivate unceasingly for years. And his current cultivation speed was like turning the tap to the maximum and crazily pouring water into the bucket. I still have 2 chances to modify the narratives. The next time I refresh it, I'll have to reach the divine sea realm. Therefore, I have to make good use of these two opportunities. Shenran supported his chin with one hand and kept thinking. Gulp, and then his belly rumbled with hunger. Hungry again, Shenran muttered to himself helplessly. The Panga's sacred body, the supreme bones, and the heavenly spirit root were all quite good, but the demand for flesh and blood essence was too great. Shenran finally understood why the cool male protagonists he had read about in his previous life would stew ancient ferocious birds and roast ancient dragons for food. They weren't greedy. They were really hungry. I have to settle my hunger pangs first. Shenran's eyes flashed as he recalled that there were 100,000 mountains at the foot of the Empyrean sword sect. There were many primordial descendants living there, so he could kill them to satisfy his needs. Bang! Shenran took a light step and instantly became a shadow that soon disappeared. Only the oil lamp on the table flickered in the dim light. Chapter 5. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Trial. Translator. Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios, behind the Empyrean sword sect, was the Grand Myriad Mountains. At this moment, outside the Grand Myriad Mountains. Swish. A figure flashed past as if he had teleported. A peak 9th level Chi refinement realm fierce cloud leopard only had time to let out an uneasy growl before a white jade-like fist kept expanding in front of it. Bong! This punch ruthlessly smashed its head. Its sheer force directly scattered all the meridians and vitality of this fierce cloud leopard. Third one. Shenran withdrew his fist and turned his neck. Immediately, his perfect body let out a series of crackling sounds. Every one of the bones lit up with a faint glow. A 9th stage Chi refinement realm fierce cloud leopard was instantly killed with a single box by Shenran. It was known that the bloodlines and bodies of these primordial beasts far exceeded that of humans. Moreover, they fought and killed all year round and were extremely difficult to deal with. In the entire Empyrean sword sect, only the chief disciples who had stepped into the divine sea realm could guarantee their victory over these beasts. However, at this moment, these primordial beasts were as fragile as paper in Shenran's hands. This was the power of talent. Even if the current Shenran was only at the 7th level of Chi refinement, he could still challenge those at a higher level and attack the divine sea. As time passed, his extremely terrifying talents would gradually be revealed and he would dazzle everyone. At that time, Shenran would debunk all the myths of the past and present. Hua hua hua, suddenly, Shenran's ears twitched as he heard a rustling sound. Shenran turned around and saw two green-robed figures flying over sneakily from the depths of the Grand Myriad Mountains. His Highness Dao Seed has consumed too much blood cloud powder to break through to the illumination realm this time. Chi. King is somewhat displeased. A fat man in green robes frowned as he spoke. It's fine. His Highness has already broken through to the illumination realm. As long as he persists for a while more, he will break through to the Marquis realm. Then he won't need this blood cloud powder anymore. A lanky man replied. Yes, let's not talk about this. After we see His Highness Dao Seed later, we'll report this matter to him and let him decide on his own. The fatter green-robed man nodded and replied. Yes, with the help of the blood cloud powder, His Highness Dao Seed will only need 3 years at most to break through to the Marquis realm. At that time, His Highness will definitely be able to become the Dao child of our Empyrean sword sect. At that time, Brother Qian and I will be considered the subjects of the dragon. I believe His Highness will definitely not mistreat us. Ha ha ha. The tall and thin man chuckled in satisfaction. They continued talking. Who is it? The tall and thin man suddenly stopped in his tracks and turned to look at Shenran. They looked at Shenran, who was dressed in black, and the carcass of the fierce cloud leopard, who had just stopped breathing. Their eyes narrowed slightly. A servant disciple, the two of them looked at each other. Only someone from the Empyrean sword sect could appear here. This black-robed man was clearly a servant disciple of the Empyrean sword sect. Shenran also looked at the two green-robed figures. Since he had bumped into them, he couldn't be bothered to hide anymore. This seems to be junior brother Shenran from the 9th summit, right? Suddenly, the plump green-robed disciple seemed to have thought of something and let out a soft gasp. Speaking of which, when Shenran bumped into Wang Qingxian a few days ago, he was following Wang Qingxian. He still had some impression of Shenran. However, it was dark now, and Shenran's disposition had changed greatly, so he did not recognize him immediately. Junior brother Shenran, what are you doing here alone in the dark? The fat green-robed disciple asked with a smile. However, he quietly looked at the tall and thin man beside him. Under the dark night, a hint of ruthlessness flashed across their faces. This information that His Highness had consumed the blood cloud powder should never be revealed. This concerned the future competition between His Highness and the other Dao seeds. There must not be any accidents. They were not sure if Shenran had overheard their conversation. However, in order to ensure that nothing was leaked, they would rather kill him than let him off. To them, Shenran was just an ordinary disciple on the mountain. Now he was even a lowly servant disciple. So what if he was killed? It wouldn't even cause a ripple. Senior brothers, didn't I just come to the servant quarters? I'm not used to it. I came out for a walk at night. Shenran scratched his head and smiled foolishly. Oh. Then junior brother Shen's luck is really good. He can even pick up the carcass of a fierce cloud leopard. This is a great supplement. As the two disciples spoke, they quietly approached Shenran. The killing intent in their eyes deepened. As for the carcass of this fierce cloud leopard. In the Grand Myriad Mountains, ancient ferocious beasts fought all year round. It was not rare for one to be lucky enough to pick up the carcass of a ferocious beast. In their opinion, Shenran was only at the 7th level of Qi refinement, so he was naturally no match for this fierce cloud leopard. They approached him quietly. They were getting closer and closer to Shenran, only 10 steps away. Move! The two green-robed disciples shouted and planned to kill Shenran at the same time. Boom! A muffled sound of an explosion suddenly sounded in their ears. The next moment, Shenran, who was 10 steps away a second ago, instantly appeared in front of them. He struck out, tore through the sound barrier, and attacked them fiercely. His punch created a huge wind. Before they received his punch, the terrifying wind from the punch had already solidified into a physical form, causing their cheeks to hurt. Under this punch, the two of them were stunned on the spot, and their pupils dilated crazily. Chapter 6. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Kill. Discovered hidden tricks. Translator. Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios. The two lackeys of Wang Qingxian did not expect Shenran to attack first. See, this kid really heard about His Highness Dao Si just now. I didn't expect this kid to be so decisive. He knows that he can't escape and decides to fight to the death. Unfortunately, he's only at the 6th level of Qi refinement. Both of us are at the perfected 10th level of Qi refinement. No matter how decisive he is, he won't be able to escape death. No. This is not the fist wind of someone at the 6th level of Qi refinement. What exactly is going on? A series of thoughts quickly flashed through their minds. At the same time, Shenran's extremely fierce fists kept enlarging in their eyes. Die. In the end, there were no other thoughts in the minds of these two cultivators. Only the simple word, die, remained. Bang! Bang! Before their bodies could respond in any way. Shenran's fist had already smashed into their faces at the same time. If it were an ordinary 7th level Qi refinement cultivator's fist, the two of them could easily dodge it. Even if they did not dodge and allowed it to hit them, it would not cause much damage to them. Unfortunately, this was Shenran's full strength. He had supreme bones and a heavenly spirit root. The Pangu sacred body was known for its strongest physical strength. Shenran, who had just broken through to the 7th level of Qi refinement, erupted with strength that was not inferior to a divine sea realm cultivator. An extremely powerful force poured into their heads through Shenran's fist. Just for a moment. The two good heads swelled and became distorted like balloons that had been filled with too much air and exploded like fireworks. Tiny bits of flesh, shattered bones, brain matter, and a lot of blood splattered everywhere. Only two headless corpses, one fat and one thin, were left. They fell heavily to the ground. Blood gushed out from their necks, quickly staining the surroundings. These two are spies from the demon sect who helped Wang Qingxian, a member of the demon sect, become a Dao seed of the Empyrean Sword sect and infiltrate the sect. With the death of Wang Qingxuan's followers, the narrative about the two of them was changed to: these are the bodies of two demon cult undercover agents. Actually, Shenran did not hear their conversation about Wang Qingxuan's identity. However, through the narrative that appeared on the two of them, he managed to identify them. The demon cult was an enemy of all forces except themselves. They were cold-blooded and selfish. In order to fight for cultivation resources and territory, they had fought with all the sections. It could be said that everyone from the demon cult was the mortal enemy of the Empyrean Sword sect. Therefore, the moment he identified the two of them, Shenran decided to kill them without any mercy. I didn't expect a spy from the demon cult to infiltrate our Empyrean Sword sect and become one of the 3 Dao seeds through shady means. Shenran, whose face was stained with some blood, recalled Wang Qingxuan's high and mighty face. His expression was uncertain. I knew that Wang Qingxian didn't look like a good person. As expected. That day, Shenran offended Wang Qingxian over a small matter. At that time, Wang Qingxuan's expression was a little ugly, but he did not say anything. Shenran thought that he was a magnanimous person. Unexpectedly, after nightfall, Wang Qingxuan's follower directly went to Shenran's bedroom and beat him up. He couldn't get out of bed for 2 weeks. The attackers were the 2 lackeys of Wang Qingxian that he had just killed. Thinking of this, Shenran was furious. He kicked the corpses on the ground twice before calming down. He casually touched the 2 demon cult corpses and took away what might be treasures. Shenran turned around and rushed back to the sect. Wang Qingxian is now in the Illumination realm and is one of the 3 great Dao seeds of the Empyrean Sword sect. The Dao seed is a candidate for the Dao child position, and the Dao child is the only successor of the future sect master of the Empyrean Sword sect. If Wang Qingxian becomes the Dao child, the outcome will be unimaginable. Shenran's expression was very solemn. I have to inform the sect about this as soon as possible. He increased his speed to the limit he could reach. He exerted strength in his legs, and the muscles on his legs bulged. The spiritual energy in his dantian surged crazily towards his legs. Every time he stepped on the ground, he suddenly exerted strength, causing a deep pit to form in the ground. His body shot forward like an arrow from a bow. The tall trees around him retreated like blurry paintings. Shenran moved at high speed, leaving a series of shadows behind him. When he chased after the fierce cloud leopard, it took him 2 hours to enter the forest. At this moment, he rushed back as fast as he could. In less than 15 minutes, the entrance of the Empyrean Sword sect appeared in his vision. The territory occupied by the Empyrean Sword sect was made up of 9 celestial peaks. The 8 secondary peaks surrounded the highest peak, forming a spirit-gathering array that gathered the spiritual energy in a radius of 10,000 miles. It could be said that these 9 mountains were a rare cultivation paradise in the world. Cultivating on it for a day was equivalent to months of hard work. According to the different concentration of spiritual energy on the different peaks, they ranged from the lowest to the highest, from the 9th to the 1st peak. At this moment, on the 2nd main peak, Wang Qingxian was pacing back and forth restlessly. His face was full of anxiety. There was no other reason. He had not taken the blood cloud powder for 3 consecutive days. The blood cloud powder was refined by the demon cult using many natural treasures. It was a precious medicine that could increase the cultivation speed of the user. It was his greatest reliance which enabled him to break through from the Qi refinement realm to the divine Sea realm in just 3 years. It was because of such a terrifying speed that Wang Qingxian became one of the 3 Dao seeds of the Empyrean Divine Palace. Now that he had been unable to experience the feeling of rapid improvement for 3 consecutive days, Wang Qingxian felt as if 100 claws were scratching his heart. Qian Shu and Zhongyu, why are you so slow? You should have obtained this month's blood cloud powder by now, right? Wang Qingxian looked in the direction of the Grand Myriad Mountains, both expectant and anxious. No, I can't wait. After taking 2 more steps back and forth, he suddenly stomped his foot and rushed out of the room. He rushed towards the mountain gate. Along the way, Wang Qingxian charged forward without looking at his fellow disciples. On the other hand, the other disciples of the Empyrean Sword sect made way in panic when they saw Wang Qingxian, one of the 3 Dao seeds. At the same time, they bowed respectfully. Some time ago, a disciple did not make way for him in time and was beaten until he could not get out of bed for half a month. This incident still lingered in everyone's hearts. Wang Qingxian didn't even look at the people around him. He just walked his own path. When he arrived at the entrance of the Empyrean Sword sect, he saw a figure rushing towards the sect from afar. That figure was Shenran. Chapter 7. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Modifying the blood cloud powder. Taking medicine. Translator. Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios Wang Qingxian. Why is he the first person I meet when I return to the sect? Shenran was surprised to see Wang Qingxian, who was walking towards the Grand Myriad Mountains. He slowed down and stopped. He suppressed the anger and hostility he felt when he saw the other party. When Wang Qingxian approached, Shenran greeted him respectfully, "Greetings, Your Highness." He had no choice. Although he had already learned of Wang Qingxuan's undercover identity, Shenran had already considered it carefully on the way. He could not do anything to him in the short term. Having gathered the supreme bones, Panga's sacred body, ancient immortal eyes, heavenly spirit root, and various other top-notch talents into his body, he had endless potential. If he could cultivate for a period of time, he would definitely be capable of glorious and earth-shattering feats. However, that was something for the future. His potential needed time to be transformed into true strength. He was only at the 7th level of Qi refinement. To Wang Qingxian, who had broken through to the illumination realm, killing Shenran was as easy as blowing air. It was completely wishful thinking to directly attack him. In terms of status, even if the other party was a spy, he was still one of the 3 Dao seeds in the eyes of others. Shenran himself was a servant disciple who had been demoted from an ordinary disciple because his potential had failed the assessment. He could shout to everyone in the sect that Wang Qingxian was a spy sent by the demon sect. But how many people in the sect would believe him? If Shenran really did that, he would probably be treated as a lunatic by the sect and become a joke. He might even be expelled from the sect for slandering the Dao seed. More serious than that, he might be killed directly. Thinking of this, Shenran regretted killing the 2 lackeys of Wang Qingxian. Otherwise, if he captured the 2 of them and handed them over to the sect for interrogation, they would be able to extract the truth from them. Then he would not be in such a dilemma. Yeah. Wang Qingxian only responded indifferently to Shenran's greeting. However, his gaze never lingered on Shenran for a second. He walked past him expressionlessly. He had probably forgotten about sending someone to beat him up and paralyze him in bed for half a month. This made Shenran, who had his head lowered, feel very humiliated. He gritted his teeth tightly. This is a spy sent by the demon sect. By consuming the precious medicine, blood cloud powder, he quickly increased his cultivation and became one of the 3 great Tao seeds of the Emperorian sword sect. Because he hasn't taken the blood cloud powder for 3 days, he's extremely frustrated. Wang Qingxian walked some distance away. Only then did Shen Ran look up, his face full of anger and grievance. Looking at the narrative that appeared on Wang Qingshuan's back, his eyes lit up. Who would have expected that the cultivation talent Wang Qingxian displays is achieved by taking medicine? Shen Ran suddenly thought of what he had just looted from the 2 lackeys of Wang Qingxian. He rummaged for a thumb-sized porcelain vial. The relevant narrative immediately appeared. Blood cloud powder. This is a precious medicine that can increase the user's cultivation speed by 10 times. Is this what Wang Qingxian relies on to become a Tao seed? Shen Ran's eyes lit up as he thought to himself, good stuff. Wang Qingxian relies on it to display a monstrous cultivation speed. With my top talent in the world and the help of this medicine, my cultivation speed will be the most monstrous among demons. After quickly looking around, Shen Ran quickly kept the 2 bottles of blood cloud powder. He turned and stepped through the gate to go back to his quarters. It was already late at night, but old Su, who had gone out to drink, still had no intention of returning. Phew! Wang Qingshuan's arrogant face appeared before his eyes. Taking a deep breath and suppressing the churning anger in his heart, Shen Ran took out the blood cloud powder again. There was no point in complaining or getting angry in the face of harsh reality. It was a waste of time to wallow in it. The world was not fair. All praise and beauty would only belong to the strong. And even if the weak held the truth in their hands, if these truth were a threat to the strong, then the so-called truth would only become poison to kill the weak. I want to be strong. Shen Ran's gaze was firm, his eyes shining. He had a unique cultivation talent in this world. As long as he became powerful enough, be it Wang Qingxian or any other possible threats, he could crush them all. Cultivate. 1,000 thoughts churned and finally turned into one word. As for Shen Ran, his originally agitated mood slowly calmed down. He no longer had any distracting thoughts. As long as he became the strongest person in the world, all the difficulties and dangers would turn into a breeze that would not trouble him at all. After his thoughts settled, Shen Ran looked at the blood cloud powder in his hand. Blood cloud powder. This is a precious medicine that can increase the user's cultivation speed by 10 times. The user's realm needs to exceed the divine sea realm. Otherwise, under the impact of the huge medicinal effect, the user will implode and die. Can't Qi refinement realm cultivators take this medicine? Looking at the narrative that appeared on the blood cloud powder, Shen Ran was stunned. But then he smiled calmly. The others can't take it, but I don't have that problem. There are still 2 chances to change narratives. If not now, when? Change the narrative. With a thought, the narrative of the blood cloud powder immediately became adjustable. Blood cloud powder. This is the world's top-notch blood cloud powder. It can increase the cultivation speed of the user by 10 times. The user of any realm can perfectly absorb the medicinal power. Is that reasonable? It's very reasonable. Modify. Shen Ran smiled calmly and completed the modification. The function of modifying the narrative could only be used to modify the narrative of things directly related to Shen Ran. At the same time, the revised narrative needed to conform to the logic of reality in order to succeed. Ding! Narrative modification system loading. Narrative modification system loading successful. After hearing the notification that the system had successfully modified it, Shen Ran opened the porcelain bottle containing the blood cloud powder. Instantly, the entire room was filled with the rich fragrance of the strange medicine. Just by smelling it, Shen Ran could sense that the spiritual energy in his body was circulating much faster. It could be seen how terrifying the effects of the blood cloud powder were. With the help of this medicine, his cultivation speed could reach another level. Immediately, Shenran swallowed the blood cloud powder in the porcelain bottle. He entered a cultivation state. Who the hell did this? In the Grand Myriad Mountains, Wang Qingxian looked at the two headless corpses that had been eaten by ancient ferocious beasts. He was furious. The roar that contained endless anger created a substantial sound wave. It turned the tall trees within a 10-mile radius into dust, along with the hundreds of ancient ferocious beasts in the vicinity. Chapter 8. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Great Breakthrough. Translator. Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios. Breathe, breathe. Shenran, who was sitting cross-legged on the bed and entering a cultivation state, kept heaving his chest. Two thick white streams of air, like flood dragons, kept flickering between his mouth and nose. With the enhancement of the blood cloud powder, Shenran's terrifying cultivation speed actually increased by more than 10 times. His body seemed to have transformed into a bottomless black hole that devoured the surrounding spiritual energy at an unimaginable speed. Around his residence, the other servant disciples who were also cultivating within a 10-mile radius sensed that the spiritual energy in the air was rapidly thinning. They all guessed that the spiritual energy supply in the sect had decreased again. After all, such things had happened before. However, no one would think that spiritual energy was scarce because someone was cultivating at that moment. After all, the surrounding disciples were not talented. Even ordinary disciples with much stronger talent could not cause such a situation if they cultivated here. A huge amount of spiritual energy surged into Shenran's body without stopping. It penetrated deep into his limbs and bones, and his internal organs, swam along his meridians, strengthening his body at an unbelievable speed. It could be said that Shenran's body was getting stronger every second. His cultivation realm also rose at a rocket-like speed. 8th level of Qi refinement. 9th level of Qi refinement. 10th level of Qi refinement. Perfected Qi refinement. The enhancement brought by the blood cloud powder in his body finally burned away. Shenran slowly opened his eyes. Buzz. Two thick golden pillars of light shot into the sky from his eyes. The space shook with it. In his body, golden runes flickered on more than 300 bones, emitting terrifying power. A dignity that belonged to the 9 heavens supremacy spread out from him. On the 9th summit, all the disciples who were still sleeping suddenly woke up when they sensed the aura of the supreme bones. They were puzzled by the instinctive desire to kowtow to the servant disciples' residential area. Phew, Shenran let out a long breath and looked helpless. The spiritual energy he had just absorbed was probably enough for 1,000 people to break through to the divine sea realm. However, half of the spiritual energy he absorbed was divided between the Panga's sacred body, the ancient immortal eyes, and the supreme bones. The other half was infinitely compressed and purified by the heavenly spirit root. He had just advanced from the 7th level of Qi refinement to the perfected Qi refinement realm. He was only a step away from breaking through to the divine sea realm. However, Shenran sensed that the spiritual energy in his dantian had already been purified and compressed into a liquid state. Any drop of liquid spiritual energy could match the full cultivation of an ordinary perfected Qi refinement cultivator. In addition, his Panga's sacred body had also been strengthened. With his well-proportioned muscles, he could feel an explosive strength in any movement. Shenran estimated that his current strength was more than 10,000 caddies. He could kill a cultivator at the perfected Qi refinement realm or even the divine sea realm. Therefore, although his realm seemed to be only at the perfected Qi refinement realm on the surface, his actual combat strength was far beyond that. He stood up and stretched. All the bones in his body crackled like fried beans. Awesome! The pleasure of increasing his strength made Shenran feel very wonderful. He had not slept all night, but he was very energetic. He pushed open the door and walked out of his residence. The sky was already slightly bright. Shenran breathed in the cool morning air and felt that the future was full of hope. Plop! At this moment, old Su, who had not returned all night, walked over with a mouthful of big yellow teeth. Before he could greet Shenran, he knelt down. Shenran quickly helped old Su up. When he smelled the alcohol on him, he couldn't help but frown. "How much did you drink last night?" Old Su scratched his head in confusion. "I didn't drink much. It was not even half of my usual amount. Why am I feeling wobbly and kneeling down? It's really strange." Looking at Shenran, old Su felt that the current him was already different from when they first met yesterday. But he couldn't tell exactly what was different. "Why are you looking at me like that? I'm not interested in men." Shenran felt goosebumps from old Su's stare. "Get lost. You make it sound like I'm interested in men." Old Su hurriedly stood up straight and yawned. "I'm going to catch up on my sleep. Remember to go to the servant quarters to receive your mission today. The servant disciples have to take on servant missions every day. If they don't complete it for 3 days in a row, they will be expelled from the sect. Don't forget that. Don't you have to accept missions?" Shenran looked at old Su, who was walking towards his residence. He couldn't help but be curious. "Do you think I went to have fun last night? I went to complete a mission. However, not everyone can accept this mission of mine. You have to be as old as me. Alright, stop disturbing me and go take the mission." With that, old Su slammed the door of the residence. Before long, the snoring inside the door began. "I wonder which ordinary disciple will issue a mission to let a servant disciple drink with him. Could he be an old drunkard like old Su?" Shaking his head, Shenran walked towards the servant office. The first task of the servant disciples of the Empyrean Sword sect was to serve the ordinary disciples of the sect. Every day, the ordinary disciples would assign various chores, such as washing clothes, cleaning the rooms, irrigating the spiritual fields, and so on. The servant disciples, who were not talented in cultivation, only had time to cultivate after completing a servant mission every day. The path of cultivation was uncertain. They still had to spend time dealing with chores. This was why the servant disciples would leave the sect, one after another. Unfortunately, as a servant disciple, Shenran had to accept servant missions every day if he wanted to continue staying in the Empyrean Sword sect. "Your Highness Dao Seed, after our thorough investigation, we have compiled a list of everyone who appeared in the Grand Myriad Mountains yesterday. Please take a look." After receiving the list from his subordinate, Wang Qingshuan's expression was very ugly. His 2 subordinates were killed in the Grand Myriad Mountains. The blood cloud powder that he had been cultivating this month had also disappeared. This meant that his cultivation progress would slow down significantly in the next month. If news of his followers carrying the demon blood cloud powder spread, his identity as a spy from the demon cult would also be exposed. However, this matter could not be reported to the sect. If he let the people from the Empyrean Sword sect get involved in this matter, his undercover identity would definitely be exposed. Therefore, Wang Qingxian secretly got his subordinate to compile this list. Glancing at the list, Wang Qingxian read out a few names. Empyrean Sword Sect, Luo Hao, 4th level of the Divine Sea Realm. Icy Mysterious Zither Sect, Zhu Wanqing, 7th level Divine Sea Realm. Azura Sect, Yen Ao, 2nd level of the Divine Sea Realm. Beast Taming Mountain, Chen Wushuang, 6th level of the Divine Sea Realm. Note down these names and the sect they belong to. I want to visit them one by one. Wang Qingxian instructed his subordinates. The few names he read out were people who were good enough to kill his 2 sidekicks. Those whose strength was lower than the 7th level of Qi refinement, including Shenran, were not his suspects for the time being. As for the people he was targeting, Wang Qingshuan's plan was to attack them first so that they would never be able to speak. Only the dead keep secrets forever. As for the reason, they had offended the Empyrean Sword sect's Dao Seed and were sentenced to death. Chapter 9. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Interception. Translator. Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios, Senior Brother, I'm a servant disciple who comes to help you clean the courtyard. Shenran knocked on the door of a 3-story residential building with a separate courtyard. Every official disciple of the Empyrean Sword sect had better living conditions than the servant disciples. Before Shenran was demoted to a servant disciple, he also had such a courtyard. The door opened and an ordinary disciple with dirty hair and clothes popped his head out. He sized up Shenran and said, "Are you the servant who's cleaning the courtyard for me today? Then remember that other than cleaning the courtyard outside the house, you are not allowed to step into my room or peek. Otherwise, I won't let you off. Do you hear me?" Shenran did not immediately reply. His attention was completely attracted by the narrative that appeared on his body. This is an ordinary disciple of the Empyrean Sword sect. He is obsessed with refining pills and often does not sleep or rest in order to refine pills, but he has made no progress. On the 5th day of the first month of the year 3074, at an ancient medicine stall at the entrance of Barter Street, he accidentally spent 10 spirit stones to buy a supreme-grade spirit gathering pill. With the help of the pill, he broke through continuously and became a core disciple of the Empyrean Sword sect. The 5th day of the first month in 3074. Isn't it today? 10 spirit stones can buy a supreme-grade spirit gathering pill. There's actually such a good thing. Shenran was delighted as he read the narrative. The blood cloud powder he had consumed last night had brought him an experience that increased his cultivation speed by 10 times. It was unforgettable. If he could always have a high-level pill like the blood cloud powder as a supplement, he was confident that he would be able to break through to the same illumination realm as Wang Qingxian in less than a month. The spirit gathering pill was a high-level pill with an effect similar to the blood cloud powder. Unfortunately, as a high-level pill, the spirit gathering pill was naturally expensive. As a servant disciple, Shenran only earned 1 spirit stone a month. Previously, he had accumulated 100 spirit stones as an ordinary disciple. Forget about the spirit gathering pill. It would take him decades to afford even the residue of the spirit gathering pill. And the effect of a supreme-grade spirit gathering pill was 10 times that of an ordinary spirit gathering pill. That was something unattainable that Shenran could only dream of. He did not expect to receive such good news after casually glancing at someone's narrative. He only needed 10 spirit stones to buy a supreme-grade spirit gathering pill. Shenran could not help but smile. "What are you giggling about? Did you hear what I said?" Seeing that Shenran did not reply, the ordinary disciple frowned in anger. Yes. Don't worry, senior brother. I'll definitely clean your courtyard and I'll never step into your room." Shenran did not take the other party's unfriendly tone to heart at all. After all, the supreme-grade medicinal pill that should have belonged to the senior brother was about to become Shenran's. It was only right for him to be chided. Good to know. He could not hid a smiling face. Seeing Shenran smile, the ordinary disciple could not vent his anger. Snorting, he returned to the room and slammed the door. Shenran chuckled and did his best to clean up the entire courtyard. Then he returned to his residence and took the 100 spirit stones he had saved. He hummed a happy tune and made his way to Barter Street. This street was for the disciples of the Empyrean Sword sect to trade freely. BL.net All the disciples could bring to the stall the items they wanted to sell. There were only 2 ways to trade. They either exchanged items or used spirit stones filled with spiritual energy as currency to buy them. When Shenran first arrived at Barter Street, it was evening. There were not many people setting up stalls on the street. He took his time, waiting patiently as he crouched at the entrance to Barter Street. Night fell quickly. When a green-robed servant disciple took out the items he was about to sell and set up a stall, Shenran's eyes lit up and he jumped. "Fellow disciple, may I ask who you are?" Looking at Shenran's passionate expression, the servant disciple secretly swallowed his saliva. "What are you selling?" Shenran asked, looking at the item in the other party's hand. "I'm selling ancient medicines I just found in an ancient tomb. 10 spirit stones each. Do you want to buy them?" The servant disciple spoke hesitantly. The so-called ancient medicines were pills that had been stored in ancient tombs or ruins for countless years. With that, the servant disciple took out all the porcelain bottles containing ancient medicine from his bag. All the porcelain bottles were sealed properly, emitting a rotten aura. Many of the bottles had fine cracks. The purchase of ancient medicines was also known as betting on medicine. This was because these medicine bottles found in the ancient tomb had never been opened after they were found. No one knew what the ancient medicine bottles contained. No one knew how much medicinal power was left in those ancient medicine bottles after so many years. Most ancient medicines were not very expensive. However, most of the time, the ancient medicine that one bought with spirit stones might have lost all its effects and become completely worthless. However, Shenran's expression was ecstatic when he saw the ancient medicine. He was different from other drug bettors. Shenran had come prepared after reading someone else's narrative. He was not here to try his luck. "How many ancient medicines do you have?" Shenran asked. 5. "If you want all of them, I can give you a discount." 1 ancient medicine for 8 spirit stones, the servant disciple said slowly. 7 spirit stones for 1. "I want all of them," Shenran said. He knew that one of the 5 ancient medicinal spirit stones was a supreme-grade spirit gathering pill. However, he did not know which ancient medicinal stone was the supreme-grade spirit gathering pill. The safest way was to buy them all. "Okay." After hesitating for a while, the servant disciple selling the ancient medicine nodded. After all, not many people were willing to bet on medicine. Many times, he could not even sell a single one for the whole day. Happy transaction. Shenran quickly took out 35 spirit stones and exchanged them for 5 ancient medicines. Then, he ran to an empty place and opened the ancient medicine bottles one by one. Unexpectedly, as soon as he opened the first bottle, the rich medicinal fragrance like that of the blood cloud powder floated out. Shenran was overjoyed. Supreme-grade spirit gathering pill, obtained. After putting on the bottle cap, he tried to open the other ancient medicine bottles. Unfortunately, the other 4 ancient medicine bottles were all filled with powder that had lost its medicinal effect. However, Shenran was not disappointed. Just 1 supreme-grade spirit gathering pill was worth much more than 30.5 spirit stones. Meanwhile, the door to the courtyard that Shenran had cleaned during the day was pushed open. The ordinary disciples who had just finished refining pills were about to go out to shop at Barter Street. Unexpectedly, he had just stepped out. He suddenly felt empty. He seemed to have lost something important. Feeling depressed, the disciple changed his mind about going out. Retracting the foot that had stepped out, he closed the gate. Chapter 10. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Modify the narrative. 3rd level Divine C. Translator. Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios. When Shenran returned to his residence, his roommate, Old Sue, was long gone. Probably went to drink with someone again. Shenran couldn't be bothered with him. The night was quiet and there was no one around. It was a good time to cultivate. Taking out the supreme-grade spirit gathering pill that he had just bought, a line of narrative appeared. This is a supreme-grade spirit gathering pill. It can increase the user's cultivation speed by 20 times. The user's realm must exceed the Divine C realm. Otherwise, the user will implode and die under the impact of the huge medicinal effect. Shenran's face darkened when he saw the consumption restrictions right at the end of the narrative. Unexpectedly, this supreme-grade spirit gathering pill could only be consumed by those above the Divine C realm. However, He thought that he still had one chance to modify the narrative. And he was only one step away from breaking through to the divine sea realm. With the help of this supreme-grade spirit gathering pill, he would definitely be able to break through tonight. At that time, the opportunity to modify the narrative would be refreshed. Thinking of this, Shen Ran's heart no longer ached. He directly chose to modify the narrative of the supreme-grade spirit gathering pill. This is the world's supreme-grade spirit gathering pill. It can increase the user's cultivation speed by 20 times. Any user can perfectly absorb the medicinal effect. Ding! Narrative modification system loading. Narrative modification system loading successful. Modification complete. Shen Ran took this supreme-grade spirit gathering pill without hesitation and sat cross-legged to cultivate. How terrifying was the cultivation speed of someone who had the Panga's sacred body, the ancient immortal eyes, more than 300 supreme bones, and the strongest heavenly spirit root in the world after consuming a supreme-grade spirit gathering pill. As Shen Ran entered a cultivation state, the spiritual energy in a radius of 50 miles was instantly sucked dry. His dantian was like the most terrifying bottomless pit in the world, devouring all the surging spiritual energy. The entire ninth summit servant disciples widened their eyes. What's the situation now? Is the sect doing some kind of experiment? Why did the spiritual energy in the servant quarters decrease last night but is completely drained tonight? The ordinary disciples who were nearer to the servant quarters were all affected by Shen Ran's cultivation. Many ordinary disciples who were in the process of cultivation left their practice. They felt the rapidly thinning spiritual energy in the air. They were worried that something might have happened to the sect and that the spiritual veins used to supply spiritual energy might have dried up. This little guy's talent is really terrifying. He caused such a huge commotion just by breaking through to the divine sea realm. Shen Ran's cultivation also attracted the attention of the old man in the Taoist robe. The old man slowly opened his eyes. A rare hint of joy appeared in his ancient eyes. Forget it. It will be difficult for young eagles to spread their wings and fly on their own in the future if they are overly protected. But a young flower exposed to the sun before it grows will be destroyed. So I'll help you. As he muttered to himself, the old man left the meditation cushion he was sitting on. He walked to a potted orchid plant that was filled with spiritual energy. The leaves and flowers were like carved white jade that had yet to bloom. A ladle filled with clear water appeared in his withered hand. The ladle tilted, and the clear water poured onto the orchid plant. Whoosh, on the ninth summit. Without warning, a torrential downpour began. In the servant quarters, the originally exhausted spiritual energy was instantly replenished as the fine rain fell. In the blink of an eye, the spiritual energy in the air was more than 10 times richer than usual. The raindrops falling from the sky were actually filled with dense spiritual energy. It turned out that the collapse of spiritual energy was an auspicious sign of spiritual rain. When all the disciples who had withdrawn from their cultivation saw this situation, they hurriedly sat cross-legged and circulated their cultivation techniques to guide spiritual energy into their bodies. A spiritual rain was a rare blessing. At this moment, every drop of rain carried extremely pure and dense spiritual energy. Cultivating in the spiritual rain was equivalent to 100 days of cultivation. It was not up to them to waste time. At the same time, Shen Ran, who was in a cultivation state, was secretly complaining that the spiritual energy in the servant quarters was too scarce. He had only cultivated for half an hour when there was no trace of spiritual energy in the surrounding air. His heart ached that the effect of the supreme-grade spirit gathering pill would be wasted. Unexpectedly, a storm came and the spiritual energy in the air around him became more than 100 times richer. He didn't know what had happened. However, he understood that this was the best time to cultivate. For a moment, Shen Ran increased his devouring of spiritual energy. The spiritual energy in his dantian became filled at an extremely terrifying speed. Crack. His dantian was filled with liquid spiritual energy. The next moment, Shenran felt that he had broken through an invisible barrier. A boundless sea of spiritual energy formed in the void of his body. The Pangu's sacred body, the supreme bones, the ancient immortal eyes, and the heavenly spirit root were all overjoyed at this moment. They tried their best to crazily devour the surrounding spiritual energy. The shackles were broken, and the divine sea was opened. At this moment, Shenran had already stepped into the divine sea realm above the Qi refinement realm. The spiritual energy was no longer restricted to his dantian in his abdomen. Instead, it could be infinitely filled in his newly opened divine sea realm. First level of the divine sea realm. Second level of the divine sea realm. Third level of the divine sea realm. He had clearly just broken through to the divine sea realm, but Shenran could not feel the existence of a bottleneck at all. His realm rose continuously. It would have been different for others wanting to break through the realm. Even if one was talented and had an unlimited supply of top-notch pills, it would take months or even years to polish up one's cultivation level. After the spiritual rain descended, he broke through 3 realms in a short period of time. The heavenly spirit root circulated crazily, purifying and compressing all the spiritual energy in the divine sea. A drop of spiritual energy in Shenran's divine sea was enough to match the full cultivation of an ordinary third-level divine sea realm. At the same time, the more than 300 supreme bones in his body flickered with dazzling golden light. His entire divine sea that was used to store spiritual energy turned golden. Every drop of golden spiritual energy emitted a dictatorial ancient supreme aura. In addition, the Panga's sacred body also repeatedly tempered every muscle fiber with the rich spiritual energy in heaven and on earth. Shenran's body structure did not change at all from the external appearance. However, the mass and density of each of his muscles became extremely terrifying as he breathed. Boom! The bed under Shenran collapsed under his unparalleled weight. Even the solid floor was smashed till there was a deep hole. Boom, boom, every time Shenran inhaled, his lungs expanded, and he could actually suck the surrounding air dry, forming a vacuum and causing an explosion. It could be seen how strong his physical body had become. Phew, Shenran exhaled and slowly opened his eyes. The rain which was pouring all night had already stopped. Third level of the divine sea realm. Clenching his fists, Shenran felt the explosive power in his body and smiled. At this moment, his body could carry 10,000 caddies of force. In the divine sea, a drop of supreme golden spiritual energy was comparable to the cultivation of an ordinary third-level divine sea cultivator. Shenran was confident that even if a divine sea expert at his peak stood in front of him now, he could suppress him with a single punch.